When you buy Kroger brand products, you feel like you're winning. That's because they offer proven quality at lower than low prices. In fact, we guarantee that you and your family will love how Kroger brand products taste, or you get your money back. So next time you're shopping for the family, look for delicious Kroger brand products, because they'll make you all feel like you're winning. Shop now, in-store, or online. Bakers, fresh for everyone.
It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it, because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant pride.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. Have some fun.
Welcome to Thursday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com and the mobile app. He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. It's presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Multiple ways you can interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. Option 2, hashtag Giants Chat. Option 3, you can send it directly to the two of us. I'm at Lance Medow, one word, last name, Medow. He is at Giants WFAN. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast. So things heating up as free agency will get going on Monday. Before then, the new league year starts on Wednesday, March 13th. This is the first time that we're on since the Giants made the decision not to tag anyone. Right. So I want to get into that, Paul. And then also, there's been a lot of movement around the NFL, specifically impacting the safety position. We've seen a lot of veterans be released, and that's tied in to Xavier McKinney. So let's first start on the Giants front. When I was on Tuesday, there were a lot of reports that the Giants were not going to tag Saquon Barkley, so that wasn't necessarily a surprising development. There were some whispers maybe McKinney gets the transition tag so that the Giants
never
give themselves an opportunity.
I never believed that for 1 second.
I'm just saying there were at least some whispers out there, and clearly that never came to fruition. But the reason I want to highlight McKinney here for a second, we have seen over the last few days the Bills parted ways with Jordan Poyer, and the Broncos just released Justin Simmons. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, there's a lot of competition out there for the safety position if a team wants to go out and help themselves in that spot. There's, though, Paul, a distinct difference between evaluating a player like McKinney versus Poyer and Simmons. And I'm not even going to go the route of skill set and talent. I'm going to go the route of age. Okay, McKinney's 24. Poyer and Simmons are 32 and 31 respectively. So I think in the eyes of teams, McKinney, I don't think is that dramatically impacted, is my point, by guys like Poyer and Simmons hitting the market. Not to say they're not good players. It's just I don't know if a team would be willing to make as big of an investment in those two compared to somebody like McKinney.
Well, and then there's Kevin Byard, who is 30.
Sure. Yeah.
Who was another accomplished safety on the market
who
right
was
now.
traded to the Eagles last season.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I agree with that. You would probably find more suitors at a higher price for a McKinney than you would some of these other fellows who have less tread on their tire, if you will. At the same time, I will say this about Xavier McKinney, and I like him. Okay, let me get this out of the way. I like him. I think he's a really good player. I thought he had Pro Bowl potential all over him when he came out. He's had injuries, some on the field, some off the field. The second half of last season, I think you could make a case that he may have been the best defensive player on the Giants. Now, for the whole season, you would have to go Dexter Lawrence and Bobby Okereke. Flip a coin. Sure. Both guys were really, really good. McKinney, just for the second half of the season, I thought was all pro level. First half of the season, not nearly as much. Now, this was a healthy season. This was a contract season. Don't you think another team, as they project what they think he can be and works up those numbers, says to themselves, wow, he was healthy all year, and it was a contract year, and it took him until like the 10th week of the season to truly ball out? That's something they got to ask themselves, don't you think?
I'm sure that they'll take that into consideration, but I think most teams are looking more at his upside and his age and how he could fit into their scheme.
And I'm sure that's a significant part of it. I would simply say, though, there's going to be a yellow flag there. There's going to be a word of caution because a guy who was healthy the whole season played every single snap, okay? For the first time in his career, he played every single snap. He was as durable as can be. Did not have a good first half of the season in what was a contract year. We always talk about guys in their contract year. Oh, they're going to push the pedal to the metal. Sure. They know that they're going to try to enhance their value in every way possible to either their current team or the team that they're looking to impress. Why did it take so long for the switch to go off? I think teams are going to ask themselves that. And that, to me, is part of the equation when you decide what kind of offer you're going to give him.
You could argue the defensive start overall was slow across the board, right? I mean, that entire unit struggled in the early stages.
There were a lot of troubles with the Giants this year.
No,
a lot of troubles.
But what I'm saying is I'm thinking maybe teams look at it that way. Hey, defense overall was struggling. He was basically a product of issues across the board, and that maybe they're saying to themselves, once the defense settled in and settled down, that's the McKinney that we think we can get moving forward.
Here's what's interesting about that. The secondary was pretty much, Pinnock was there almost the whole year, missed very few snaps.
Until the very end of the season.
Okay.
Yep.
Banks had a really solid rookie season and was there, for the most part, pretty durable. Jackson missed a few games, but to me, the secondary wasn't so badly decimated. They didn't have to play so many musical chairs that I would be willing to use that as an excuse for him not necessarily playing to the optimum level that he showed during the second half of the season. Well, I just say it's a yellow flag for me. I'm not saying that I don't want him back. Okay, the Giants have already said they'd like to bring him back. I'm not saying that that's not a good move. What I'm saying is, from the outside looking in, that's got to be a question a suitor might want to ask themselves.
No, all fair, and the Giants will, given the fact that they didn't give him the tag, they'll allow the market to dictate. And there's nothing wrong with allowing the market to dictate, because even if they don't get a deal done by Monday, and I would think from McKinney and Barkley's perspectives, they're not complaining that they're hitting the market, because now they can use other teams to then bring back offers to the Giants or whatever it may be, right? I mean, isn't the goal, Paul, every player wants to hit the market. If you ask Saquon last season, the reason why him and the rest of the running backs were disappointed they got the tag is they can't test themselves. They can't see what their worth is, right, in relation to the rest of the NFL. So I find it hard to believe that McKinney and Barkley are put in that position and they're not going to at least take an opportunity to test the market. That's why I would be surprised if anything gets done between those two players and the Giants prior to Monday.
Right.
I think they're going to go out there, they're going to see what the market has to offer.
From their perspective, there's no point in signing a deal before next week.
Yep.
There's just not. It doesn't make any business sense to do so unless, and I don't think this has happened, but we don't know for sure, the Giants have said to them, okay, this is our final offer, and if you go outside, we're not talking about it anymore. I don't think the Giants have done that with either player. I don't know that, folks. I don't want to speak for the front office upstairs. I don't know that, but I don't think that's happened. And that would be the only way that you would have to start to consider your options. Otherwise, you need to go into free agency next week.
And I would think even going down your hypothetical road, Paul, if let's say that exists, and we're not saying that that does exist, I still think the players probably would say, I'd rather roll the dice and test the market, because you're playing the game of the unknown. Would you rather take the game of the unknown or what's offered to you here?
Well, you know what's interesting?
They would probably play the game of the unknown.
Julian Love had that chance, and he waited and wanted to play the field. And he played the field. And then he got the offer from Seattle, came back to the Giants and said, look, no, I'd really like to stay. And they said, no, we already told you. We used up your money on other guys in free agency. We gave you a chance at the time to do the deal. And we told you, we've got to move on to other players and we've got to spend other dollars on other positions. And so by the time he came back to them, it was too late. So, there is a risk.
Oh, well, that's why I said you're rolling the dice.
There's a risk.
That aspect.
He's not happy that he took it, wound up in Seattle, and did wind up becoming a Pro Bowl pick, which is great, but it's not exactly what he wanted because he would have rather stayed.
Well, I mean, he also had the opportunity to knock on the door of the postseason, too, given the circumstances of how things played out in Seattle. So, there's pros and cons in terms of how you're looking at it. Though, I would argue, I think Love and McKinney are two different players in terms of how the market will view them and how the market will treat them. So you got to take that into consideration as well, based on how teams are aggressively looking to go down the road of offering them whatever it may be.
Well, let's put it this way. Love has been more durable. Love has shown a little more versatility.
Well, because of the cornerback spot. Sure.
He has shown the ability to be more consistent.
And that's part of staying on the field, I would argue. But McKinney,
no doubt.
McKinney was a higher pick. McKinney, more prominent program. I know Love went to Notre Dame. I'm not taking a shot at Notre Dame, but Alabama is known for producing
I understand that, and there's always been a thought that McKinney would be a Pro Bowl player. The thought was that Love would just be a good player, and then he wound up becoming a Pro Bowl player this season anyway, which I think actually exceeded some people's expectations.
Sure. Well, he made the most of his opportunity, and that goes back to what you were saying, that I think the Seattle Seahawks even said to themselves, hey, even if it doesn't pan out at safety, we could always throw Love in a corner because he's comfortable at both of those spots. Now, with McKinney...
It's not his best position, but he can do it.
But he can do it. With McKinney, you're not having that conversation. You bring in McKinney, McKinney's a safety.
Correct.
So that's why I'm saying there are differences. Whether they're good or bad, there's differences in terms of the evaluation of the versatility as well as the position and the hype that they bring to the table based on their previous history, whether it be on the collegiate level or the NFL level.
McKinney will get more money out of his contract than Love got this past year. If that's your point, then I totally agree.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was hammering home, and that's why it goes back to where we started. I think it's a little misleading when individuals think additional safeties hitting the market hurts McKinney and helps the Giants' cause. I think if there were a bunch of 24-year-old safeties hitting the market, I would say now McKinney's got some food for thought, something to think about. When you're infusing the market with 30-year-olds who have been in the NFL for quite some time and have some baggage, and I'm not using baggage as a bad or a negative connotation. It's just there's a reason why the Broncos and the Bills are letting go of those two players. And I'm telling you, it's not because those players are not valued by the organizations. It's because they don't want to invest X amount of dollars in a player who they figure maybe they get another year out of. If anything, they'd rather go younger at that position. And Paul, it's a young man's game. I mean, that's why we talk about how important it is to draft well and develop, because you want to make the most of that rookie contract, because after the rookie contract, especially if the player hasn't proven to remain healthy, you then have doubts as to whether or not you want to retain that player. So that's really what I'm getting at.
Well, based on the current free agent list at safety, okay?
And Jamal Adams is another guy that's now on the list.
If you look at the top 15 salary earners last year, okay, only 5 of them are under 30 years old. Okay?
What about Jesse Bates, who got a big deal from the Falcons? How old is Jesse Bates? Do you have that on the list? Because he's the guy that set the market.
No, this is the free agent list. I'm not talking about guys who are signed. I'm only looking at guys who are free.
I got you.
And of the guys who are free, okay, the youngest in the top 12 salaries off of last year is Jordan Whitehead of the Jets at age 27.
Who had a good year with the Jets.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at here are a bunch of higher-priced veterans who have been set free, in all honesty, because of their price. Probably not so much because of their playing ability. I mean, look at some of these names. Eddie Jackson, Quandre Diggs, Micah Hyde, Poyer. Some of these guys are accomplished players.
Oh, absolutely.
Who put together some pretty good resumes. All right, now there is some injury history for sure, but the biggest reason these guys are set free is because of the cap. Once again, the cap forces players to be set free. Football head coaches can't make decisions based on the value of the player or the strategy that you want to employ with the player. Your GM comes in and says, we can't afford the player. Sorry, I'm yanking him away, and he's out the door.
And Poyer and Hyde have also dealt with some injuries over the last few seasons too. So I wouldn't necessarily overlook that. I've now brought up the list, because you were looking at the free agent list. I have the list of all the signed safeties in the NFL and the top contracts. And I guess this is what I was focusing on in terms of the market, because if McKinney's 24, and you look at, just to give you an idea, the highest paid safeties in the NFL right now, Derwin James with the Chargers, okay, now he's dealt with some injuries, he's 28. Minka Fitzpatrick, 28 with the Steelers, and Jesse Bates, who I referenced with the Falcons, 27, and Antoine Winfield Jr., who's on this list, he's not going to hit the market because he was just given the franchise tag. So you would assume the Bucs either have him play on the tag or they get a long-term deal. You don't get to a high person age-wise until you're at 5th or 6th on the list, and that's Harrison Smith of the Vikings.
He's really old.
And he's 35, but here's the thing, Paul. He's the exception to the list, because then it resumes to 28 and 26-year-olds, whether it be a Budda Baker, Marcus Williams, and so
all
forth.
the guys who are right around 30 are on this list.
Correct.
The list that's available.
Sure. No, but
that's why.
But I'm saying that, I mean, the guys that recently got big money, and Jesse Bates, he was a free agent last season. Mm-hmm. And the Falcons are not complaining. He had a fantastic season.
Good player.
And he was a great player with Cincinnati. But Bates got, his total value of his deal was $64 million, average salary just over $16 million. He got $36 million guaranteed. Now, Jesse Bates is not Xavier McKinney, vice versa. So I'm not using this. But what I'm saying is that the big money is going to go towards players in the age bracket of McKinney, much more so than the laundry list of individuals that you have up on your computer screen. Meaning, I think if somebody wants to get a Jordan Poyer or a Justin Simmons, you know, they probably can get a 1 or a 2 year deal at decent money, and you don't have to break open the bank. And that's why I'm saying I wouldn't read into those players becoming available negatively impacting McKinney's earning power. That's what
I don't have a problem with your premise. I don't. I'm trying to sort through the kinds of things that a potential suitor will think about if they want to make him an offer. I'm not going to debate the price, how high, how low. There are questions that they will have to answer for themselves before making a pitch. That's really all I was trying to do.
No, and the injury history is something that I would probably put as the biggest question mark atop my list for McKinney. I mean, if you're going to make that investment, you want to know the player is going to stay on the field. Paul, it's no different as we bring Saquon Barkley into the conversation, and same thing about teams evaluating him, and the running back market's nowhere near what the safety market was, money-wise and earning power. But with Saquon, and he's 6 years into his NFL career. McKinney's 4.
Right?
Because McKinney didn't have the 5th-year option or a tag. You have to further say to yourself, even if you love the talent, how many years are we willing to go? How much guaranteed money are we willing to go, knowing that he's entering year 7? And if you give Saquon a 2 to 3 year deal, and I understand maybe all the years are not guaranteed, but you know, you're going to get further and further removed, Paul, from the time that he was drafted. Now, all it takes is one team. But I think even if somebody gives Saquon a competitive offer, I find it hard to believe that we're going to go beyond a 2 year deal. I'd be very surprised. You think?
I think the third year is going to be a ghost year.
Okay, but
to help the cap out.
Meaning his
guaranteed money is going to come in the first 2 years of the deal.
I'm with you.
And the third year is going to be a ghost year, just for cap purposes. Which, you know,
or the third year is a team option, essentially.
This is what you have to do. You're forced to play these games because of the salary cap.
Well, and that's why, I mean, look, the Buffalo Bills, they didn't just get rid of Jordan Poyer, by the way. They got rid of Mitch Morse, their starting center.
It's like 5 regular players.
Contributed. I mean, Tre'Davious White was hurt the last 2 seasons, only played 10 games. Not to say he's not a good player, but they've experienced life without him. Poyer and Morse have been staples of that franchise.
Yeah.
And this is what happens. You can't keep everybody. That's why when we have conversations about the Giants, Paul, I say this all the time. the fan base for the Giants operates in the Giants bubble, and I get that. You're invested in your team, but the Giants deal with the same challenges as the 31 other teams in the NFL. They're not an exception, and the norm is pretty much what Buffalo's going through, where you win for a few years and then all of a sudden you come to the realization guys are getting up there in age, you got to get younger, you need to rely on the draft. That's the cycle of the National Football League.
Well, that's because the salary cap has no friends. It's an equal opportunity slasher right across the entire league.
Dramatically takes advantage of it because they can't. So it's an equal playing field.
You know, I go back to, I still think the NFL should have like the NBA does with bird rights. I'm sorry. I believe they should have that, but whatever. That's another time for another day.
All right, few announcements before we open up the phone lines here on Big Blue Kickoff Live, Giants Huddle Podcast. You can check that out, your favorite podcast platform. You can also go to giants.com/podcast. Looking ahead to the 2024 season, you take your fandom to the next level with a season ticket membership. Stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. Memberships are now available for the 2024 season. To learn more about all the exclusive member benefits, visit giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. And the Giants official connected TV streaming app, Giants TV. It brings you original video content, endgame highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV, it's free. It's on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and the Giants mobile app. As we move forward here, let's open up the phone lines and we check in with Phil in North Carolina. Phil, welcome to BBKL. What do you got for us?
Hey, guys. Thanks for your show. Want to think about, planning strategy, and I feel like we didn't have enough foresight when last year we let Julian Love go. And this year we'll also let basically, I don't see us being able to come to an agreement with McKinney. I would be shocked. But, you have to be strong on all three levels on defense. And we should have, I feel, we're going to let McKinney go. We should have had the foresight to keep Love last year.
But they tried to keep Love, and he did not cooperate with their plans. They offered him a deal that he eventually wanted to take, but it was too late because they had to move on and get other free agents. I disagree with you. I think they had foresight. They wanted him to be a part of the future, and he delayed. I mean, that was on him. That was strictly his decision, and he admits to that. He delayed. It was too late. When by the time he came back, they had already filled up some other spots on the roster. So he was a priority. They came to him early in the process. And he delayed. He dragged his feet. That's on him. That's not on the Giants. You got it wrong.
Not Paul, though. You have to factor in all these various things that happen. It's not about making an excuse. It's about kind of building the team the best way. And now we're at the fact is we're at a shortage in the safety position now.
See, they don't think so. They don't think so. No, but they don't think so. They're pretty satisfied with Pinnock. They're very high on Dane Belton, who seems to be around the ball and making plays every time he gets on the field. They really like Javarius Owens, who was drafted on the third day last year, and they think he is a mega sleeper. And they really like him a lot. So they don't believe that the cupboard is bare at safety. They would disagree with you.
Yeah, well, I hope you're right, and I realize that's what they're thinking. But I'm trying to avoid this constant overreaction. I'd like a smoother transition between, as we develop a team. Because I've seen this over the years, even in prior regimes. We've kind of done this, overreact. Now we're short on this area. We have to compensate. I want to see a more well thought out plan over time. So that's my position.
Well, I mean, Phil, I think you answered your own question. I would piggyback off of Paul's point. They drafted Owens in 2023. Belton was a draft pick in 2022. So you could argue they are thinking ahead to a certain degree by bringing in younger safeties in the situation in which they lose some of the players ahead of them on the depth chart. I mean, isn't that anticipating and trying to get that seamless transition to a certain degree?
It is to a certain degree. Yeah, I guess we're differing on how we feel the degree is, essentially. I think we're a little short. You guys might think we're a little bit over. So hopefully, I do like their position on I think what they're going to do is get an offensive guard and an edge rusher, and that's where they want to put their resources. So that is a favorable thing in terms of my view of the team building process. But I just want us to be. I want our agent or our group to be top notch in terms of ahead of everybody else in the way we're planning, we're thinking about team building and so forth, because that's how we're going to get sustained success in the future. So anyway, thanks guys. I appreciate it.
All right, be good.
Yeah, appreciate
Take care.
the phone call. I mean, that's how you have sustainable success. You draft in years prior to guys leaving in free agency. I mean, that's what they did, Paul, for years, and this was the old regime. Remember, they bring in all these defensive pass rushers.
And linebackers for a while,
so that
too.
when they lost guys, or with the whole Linval Joseph at the defensive tackle, right, they draft a guy a year or two earlier, and so forth. Jonathan Hankins was involved in that. That was a process.
This is why so many guys will remind you, draft the best player available, because you can never have too many good guys at one position. At some point in time, you will need him. I mean, that's the theory behind that.
Well,
you're always going to be able to use really good players.
And to the caller's point, Owens has barely played any defensive snaps, so we're having a potential.
He's basically a red shirt.
Yeah, but it's a potential conversation, and we have not seen Belton for 17 games in that spot too. So there's been flashes. So we're not selling you on the fact that they know, even in the front office, that what those guys would do if you mapped it out.
They're optimistic and hopeful, and
Because
that's all you can say.
And that's part of draft
but here's the problem. Yeah. When your team evolves over time, at some point you have to have faith and optimism, hope, and potential. You have to. Because, again, the salary cap won't let you continue to replenish and buy sure things. You just don't have that luxury. The cap says, I'm sorry, you can't do it. So you have to take leaps of faith at certain positions at certain times. It's inevitable.
And you have to give guys opportunities so you could see what's happening on the field. Not to say that you want to see Jason Pinnock get hurt, but I think it was a bit of a blessing in disguise that Belton got some of those opportunities late.
Well, yeah, because behind McKinney and Pinnock, who were both very durable and were really not wanting to come off the field.
Well, McKinney never came off the field.
Right.
So, yeah.
But between the two of them, there was not very many snaps for Belton to go around.
Yep.
And so, he would get in there maybe in the 3 safety situation, but that was about it. And he just didn't get a lot of burn. And then, obviously, Pinnock got dinged up, and that gave Belton a chance to get in there. And what happened? He gets in there, and he starts making plays. I mean, you're absolutely right. That's what they call, and Tom Coughlin always used to say this, opportunity. He used to get into players' faces sometimes, the backups. He would say, opportunity. This is your opportunity. Use it. Show us. Belton did it.
Nick McLeod's another good example, too.
Sure.
A player who had several talented guys in front of him and stepped up and proved his versatility. When you do that, that goes back to the last caller's question about the franchise not anticipating. Well, you could argue that over the last 2 years, when they've seen some of these guys sprinkled in, they have anticipated, and they've said, hey, if it gets to the point where we let McKinney walk, if it gets to the point where we let so-and-so walk, what did we see in this 2 to 3 game sample size? And what do we like? Now, what I would argue, Paul, though, the one thing, though, that complicates matters just a tad is that, and this just goes to show you how the conversation constantly evolves, is when they were evaluating the talent at this time last year, Wink Martindale was in place as the defensive coordinator.
Right. You now have a new guy.
So you were saying, okay, he's a good fit for his system. Now, with Wink gone, you got a new defensive coordinator, a new philosophy. And we talked about this around the hiring. Bowen gave them feedback on a guy like McKinney, as well as any other future free agent. So they're not operating blindly. They're listening to the feedback that Bowen provided them. And maybe they have their eyes set if they lose McKinney to another team on one of these established veterans. I mean, you brought up Byard. He's got a history with Bowen in Tennessee.
No doubt.
It's possible.
Poyer's got a history with Dable, Buffalo, and Shane.
Yeah. So does Micah Hyde.
Sure.
That could very well be a part of the dialogue before they also part ways with a player. Let's head back to the lines. We got Cliff in New York joining us here on BBKO. What's happening, Cliff? What do you got for us?
Hey, guys. Thanks for the great show. Lance, we were talking last week about the quarterback situation, and I was thinking afterwards that there's really two aspects here. The long-term and then the immediate need to go into the season with whoever, with Daniel's availability uncertain. And what I got from Joe Shane at the Combine, from his press conference and the huddle with John and Madeline, is that he didn't use the term backup quarterback. He used the term number twos and number threes, and he indicated that those number twos and number threes were subject to using draft capital on. He was looking at the draft to find guys like that, and with the number one, pegged at Daniel very clearly by him at the moment.
Well, Cliff, what's the difference between a backup and a number two? I mean, I think you're really splitting hairs over these labels. What's the difference? I'm just curious how you view it.
The difference is respect. The difference is respect. It means that there could be a number two quarterback who is only supposed to be a number two quarterback and can be extremely valuable doing that, which we learned in the 1990 season, when we had a guy who was very unhappy that he couldn't be a starter and was ready to quit, and he came in as a backup and ended up being the winning quarterback in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, you're talking about Hostetler.
Right, and when he went on to play for somebody else, and he had a starting opportunity, it didn't work out so well for him. It was wonderful to have him. The point is that I think there's an acknowledgement that there are guys who are extremely valuable to have, even if they're number threes, that you have these guys who are within your building in some way, shape, or form, whatever their designation is, but they're under contract, and they have a role to play, and they're not expected to be anything else but a number two or a number three. The other thing I was trying to get at was that the Baker Mayfield is not the first time somebody really did much better with another team than he did when he first started out, and I think that creates a source for number one, that an additional source for number ones other than a high pick in the draft. What I'm getting at overall is that there's no urgency to me to look for a long-term guy in this year's draft just because there's not a lot happening in next year's draft. And by the way, I'm backing off on trading out of the first round now that I heard next year's draft is not so great, because obviously if you were going to do something that extreme, you would be getting number one picks for that. So,
well, you also don't know who's going to declare for the draft. I mean, there's still a lot of unknown. I think right now maybe the preliminary outlook, but things do change and evolve. And I think your perspective about the quarterback is still a little small-minded, Cliff, because you don't know, once again, whether or not your starter is going to hold up for the entire season. So just because you may feel good about the number one guy to start the year doesn't mean that 5 weeks into the season the conversation doesn't dramatically change. And whether Tyrod Taylor was labeled number two or a backup, he proved to be extremely valuable for the team this year, because when his number was called. So, I mean, once again, I still would argue, I think you're splitting hairs, and that's more of the mentality of the player than anything else. Meaning, does the player feel more respected because the GM refers to them as a number two or a backup? I think it's minutia at the end of the day.
Well,
that's just my opinion.
The fact that he's using draft capital on those guys is not minutia. I think of a backup as somebody who was a cast-off, and you picked him up and he can keep the ship moving basically, but not make any serious contribution. The guy that stepped in for the Bengals this year was pretty damn good, and they had that guy available, knowing that they had a number one clearly established.
Yeah, but the backup quarterback for the Bengals, Jake Browning, had been a journeyman. He wasn't a guy that they had drafted that year. He had been around the league with a variety of teams. He got an opportunity, he stepped in, he played well.
Regardless, Joe is willing to use draft capital on a number two or a number three. That's what impresses me. And as far as Daniel goes, there was some really interesting footage of the Van Ginkel hit in the Miami game, which I would hope somebody could maybe take note to see if Howard or Jonathan have seen it. I thought that he had been drilled in the back, the neck injury hit. and it was more like he came around and reached over the top, and he ended up with a forearm to the neck. And I don't know if when you're going for a strip sack, you can come over the top like that and try to come down. I usually see it happening in other ways. And the point was that I didn't think that was fair to call that a durability situation. There were two other guys bearing down on the same play, and I had understated on a previous call what Joe Shane's characterization of that day was, which was that the guys that were playing the offensive line, they weren't just the guys that played in the last exhibition game. They were the guys that played in the fourth quarter of the last exhibition game. That was the level of talent that he had blocking in that game. So the durability argument, I don't think Daniel has not lost, in my mind, any durability.
Well, I think, Cliff, and appreciate the phone call, when it comes to Daniel Jones and durability, Paul, and everybody wants to interpret this 25 ways, we don't have conversations about who's to blame for the injury. The bottom line is the guy either stays healthy or he doesn't. I think what Cliff is trying to do, based on his response, is saying, well, Daniel was hit on a certain play that brought him down. Nobody's placing the blame game on the individual player. It's just a matter of, can you stay on the field or you can't? And there's some players that do that more effectively than others. I think that's how front office executives think. They're not thinking, well, the way that the injury came about will make us feel better about taking a chance on a player. That's at least my interpretation of durability.
That's fine. I think he's looking too much into the video on that. I will say this, okay? We had a conversation, I don't know if it was with you or John, where I had come up with numbers on first round picks. Do you remember this? Is this one of the things we did? I had that conversation with you. Yeah. And I got questioned about quarterbacks in particular, so I went back and I did the research. Okay? I want to put these numbers out there. This is irrelevant to the call that we just heard about because I don't think there's really much there to talk about. There have been since the 2000 season, 27 different starting quarterbacks in the Super Bowl. Since the 2000 season, 27 different starting quarterbacks in the Super Bowl since 2000. 15 of them were first-round picks. That is 55.5%. The other 12 all came after the first round, which obviously dispels the notion that you have to have a first-round pick at quarterback to make a Super Bowl.
Sure, but 55% is a good portion of those quarterbacks, though.
44% is a pretty big number that didn't.
Well, but what's the breakdown of the other percentage? Do you have that? Do you where they were drafted? Are they undrafted free agents?
I have it all.
Okay.
There's a 7th, there's a 6th, there's a 2, a 3, a 3, a 2, a 2, an undrafted free agent, Kurt Warner. There's a 6, there's another undrafted free agent, Jake Delhomme. A 9, Brad Johnson.
Yep.
Gannon was a 4.
So they're scattered all around.
They're scattered all around.
And remember, Brady makes up a lot of those too, keep in mind.
No, he's only one. He's only one.
No, I know, but I'm saying Brady has represented teams in the Super Bowl many times.
But I'm not counting those.
No, I know you're not, but that matters in terms of context, though.
No, well, it doesn't because I only took the number of different starting quarterbacks there have been.
But also,
I'm not going to count the guys who have been there multiple times.
Sure, but I'm saying
that doesn't matter to this equation.
But it mattered to me. The point is that the guy that's had the most success, though,
was a 6
to be a 6th round pick.
Well, if anything,
and that's very rare, is what I'm saying.
All right, but if anything, then that dispels the whole. You got to have a first rounder, even more, if you really want to go that way.
No, but
now,
go ahead.
I have more numbers.
Sure,
Pro Bowl numbers. We did the gauge for first rounders and percentage of chance that the guy would make a Pro Bowl the other day based on 2000 to 2020 because anybody in the last 3 years is still in their first contract as a first round pick. So we don't want to count those guys yet. So from 2000 to 2020, there were 60 first round quarterbacks taken in the first 60 first-round quarterbacks taken from 2000 to 2020. 29 of them, only 48% have made it to a Pro Bowl. That's it. It's a flip of the coin. Only 8 of the 60 have been named NFL All-Pro, which is the real.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a better indicator.
That's the real elite of the elite. Yeah. But even the Pro Bowl, and as Howard said, you can go deep. So you're being very wishy-washy, and you're even giving people the benefit of the doubt by saying a Pro Bowl is really, really good. Still, only 48% of first-round quarterbacks taken since the year 2000 have gone to at least one Pro Bowl. It shows you what a true crapshoot it is. Okay? I am so sick and tired of everybody getting their pants in a bunch, screaming, got to draft a quarterback in the first round, got to draft one in the top 10, got to trade up and give out to Fort Knox to make a trade to get to the top 3, to get to the top 5, to get to the top 1. Folks, there are more Josh Rosens and Sam Darnolds out there than you can imagine. Okay? The facts speak for themselves. This isn't made up. This is not an opinion. This is a fact. 29 Pro Bowl quarterbacks out of 60 drafted in the first round. Now, is the number 1 pick important? Yes, it is, because I broke that down too. 15 taken number 1 overall in the draft. 12 of those guys have at least made a Pro Bowl. Only 2 of those 15 got at least one All-Pro. That's real low. Pro Bowl, though, a lot more got in. Top 6, 29 were taken in the top 6. 20 of those made a Pro Bowl. That's 69%. Only 4 became elite enough to be All-Pro. Top 10 quarterbacks taken overall in the draft since 2000. 37 of them. 23 made at least one Pro Bowl, 62%. Pretty solid number, but not a guarantee by any stretch. Only 6 of the 37 have been All-Pro. That's only 16%.
No, it's far from a guarantee. But
that's the point. And I am so sick of people acting like every single first-round quarterback is an absolute lock to be a franchise player. They are not.
Yeah, well, I mean, once again, 2004 was unique where the 3 guys that were taken high all panned out. You don't see that. So only 1 or 2 guys at max of this class is probably going to pan out. And then the rest are going to move around the league, and they may not hit their success until they get to their second team. But, keep in mind also, Pro Bowl, All-Pro, I understand that that's an attractive label. There are also guys that have carved out lengthy NFL careers who have been solid quarterbacks and may not have had the accolades and have helped their teams win. Well, so, I mean, you could still find somebody to be productive.
In theory, though, when people salivate over these guys, especially higher in the first round, they're touting them as franchise guys. If he's a franchise guy, at least at some point during his decade long in the league or so, he will have made at least one Pro Bowl. Otherwise, you don't consider him a franchise guy.
Well, and also based on the fact that people drop out left and right from the Pro Bowl.
That's what I mean.
You would figure.
Which is why I made sure my list included Pro Bowl, and I also said, all right, the elite people are all pro.
Sure.
I put together both charts so that we could dispel the notion that a first-round quarterback is an automatic given. All right? We're hearing people who can't stop falling all over themselves that Williams and May and McCarthy, and the LSU kid,
Jaden
Daniels.
Yeah.
We're hearing people falling all over themselves. The crashes are all over the turnpike with people
this happens every year.
Screaming that these guys are automatic franchise quarterbacks. Guess what? It's not. Just saying.
Well, and circling back to how we got to this conversation, the last caller bringing up about maybe the Giants address something on the depth chart through the draft. But, I mean, let's face it. They take a quarterback with the 6th overall pick. They're not anticipating that guy's going to be a number 2 quarterback for very long. Okay,
No.
If they take a quarterback at number 6, yes, he could be number 2 year 1, but before you know it, he's stepping into the starting job. So that's why this idea that they take a quarterback in the draft. Well, yeah, of course they could look to take a developmental quarterback in the mid-rounds. I mean, they've done that. The Giants have had plenty of individuals, whether it's a Davis Webb or a Ryan Nassib, but I don't think that means that they're guaranteed to pan out or prove to be better options than if you bring back Tyrod Taylor or you go after Jacoby Brissett, who has much more experience. So, I mean, that's also, to me, major differences that we're bringing to the team.
If we want to go back to the caller for 1 second before we get to the other people on hold, I have absolutely no problem philosophically with taking a quarterback in the third or fourth round as a prospect or a project, if you will, who can be somewhat insurance for Daniel Jones if, in fact, Jones can't stay healthy or if Jones does not produce at the level that he's expected to. And this way you have a guy who may be, okay, because Bo Nix will never be there. So I'm already off of that.
You're talking about once you get into like the third round.
Third or fourth round. Yeah. I'm a Bo Nix guy, but he's not going to be there in the third or fourth round. But Spencer Rattler could be there.
Sure.
Michael Pratt, who doesn't have quite the arm that Rattler has, is another guy who you would think of. Those two guys in particular really attract my attention. Someone mentioned to me the other day, Joe Milton. And I appreciate that. He just hasn't started a whole bunch of games. Between his 3 years at Michigan and his 3 years at Tennessee, he's got 17 career starts. That's not a lot of time. Now, the only way that I consider Milton is if, and maybe he's fourth round, and maybe it's because, you know what? The other two guys are gone, and I really wanted to grab a project at quarterback, and Milton's kind of sitting there like a sore thumb. He's had knee, ribs, off-season thumb surgery, missed a game with a leg injury back in 2021. I've also done a chart on all the quarterbacks, by the way, too. I've got injuries. I've got the Parcells rules. I've got all the stuff. I've done a deep dive into about 12 quarterbacks in this draft. Milton, to me, maybe fourth. I don't know. I don't think I think third, but I think if he's sitting there in the fourth and you still want a projected quarterback because of his lack of experience in terms of starting at a major program, only 17 starts in 6 years, he's got to be more of a project because you're not even thinking about putting him in anytime soon.
Well, and
he's definitely going to have to sit. As opposed to the other two guys who have played so much ball that you'd be a little less nervous if you had to put them in sooner.
Sure, but I still go back to, I find it hard to believe, Paul, that they would enter the season with Daniel Jones coming off a torn ACL, one of these mid-round guys that you're throwing out, okay, and Tommy DeVito. Because I think you want to feel better that, God forbid, Daniel's not ready or can't hold up, that somebody else is going to step in with a lot of starting experience that can run your offense and help you win games. And I don't know if the other two guys scream that overwhelmingly.
Well, if you draft a guy in the third round, DeVito's going to have to get waived to the practice squad because you're not going to keep correct. Three. And DeVito will not be there. He's going to get claimed.
Anything
so
possible.
You're not going to have him. So what I would then suggest the Giants do if they want to go this route is that you sign a veteran, okay?
Which I'm for.
You sign a veteran, and you tell that veteran that, we're gonna have you on the practice squad.
Well, it depends on who the veteran is, though. You may not be able to hold on to that.
Well, it's gonna have to be a borderline guy. Understood that at least he's experienced enough where he's seen enough stuff in the league, because if you draft a quarterback in the third round, you can't expose him to waivers. He's going to get taken.
I would argue under those circumstances, they could justify keeping three quarterbacks on the roster, Paul. It's not crazy. Under those circumstances, it's Daniel's injury history, you can argue there's room to keep three quarterbacks this year.
It's possible.
I don't think that's crazy.
I would consider it depending upon how the rest of the roster shakes out. I might consider keeping the third guy on there, or again, it might be a veteran. It might be I don't know, somebody like a Blake Bortles type, who's just looking to get back in the league. He's happy to sign what's
Bortles
his name?
Retired, yeah, but he could come.
No,
back.
You know who I'm talking about. The guy they had last year, Mark, the guy who was here last year as the backup.
Matt, you talking about?
Matt Barkley.
Matt Barkley. Yeah.
You sign somebody like that.
Okay, well, you could keep him on the practice squad.
To the practice squad. Well, you can keep him on the practice squad. He's been around a while. He's a veteran. And if you feel as though at some point during the season, your lead guy gets hurt, your rookie's not ready, and you want to throw that veteran in there for a couple of games, you would still have the opportunity to do it because you bring him off the practice squad and say, look, the kid's not ready. You're going to have to go in. You could do that too. Yeah. There's a lot of options here. That's all I'm trying to point out.
No, and I'm not disputing that. I guess I'm looking more through the lens of an upgrade with respect to the names that you're throwing out at the veteran spots.
Okay, if you do that, you're not going to probably get him to practice squad. He's going to have to stay in the 53.
For example, which is fine. Yeah, if you went after a Ryan Tannehill or you brought back or you have Jacoby Brissett.
They're not going practice squad.
That's my point, and that's how I'm looking at it.
Then you have to keep 3.
And I'm totally fine with that. I think you have to, if you're Joe Schoen, I think you say to yourself, weighing Daniel's injury history and what he's coming off of, a young guy who, let's say you take in the 3rd round, but you still want the security blanket. The 3rd round pick is not the security blanket.
Then
that's my point.
Back to your point, if you're going to keep 3, do you not even bother signing a veteran? Do you just keep DeVito as the 3rd?
Well,
you could do that too.
But then again, it depends on how you feel about DeVito in the event that he'd have to step in again and replace Daniel Jones.
I'm simply offering options. I'm not telling you that it's the right one. I'm offering different possibilities.
I completely understand where you're coming from. I'm saying that if I had my choice, my personal opinion, Daniel with a secure insurance policy, one of those 3 veterans, and I'm fine, you want to draft a guy in the 3rd round, or even if you draft a guy earlier, you're still going to keep him on the 53-man roster. You take a quarterback in the 1st round, you take a quarterback in the 2nd round. Oh, no doubt. Take a quarterback in the 3rd round, it really makes no difference. But that's the setup, I think, that puts them in a better position to at least operate the offense and be competitive. And that's all I'm saying. Let's head back to the phone lines. We got Coach Marvin with us here on BBKL. What's happening, Coach Marvin?
Hey, how you doing, Lance and Paul?
Hi. What do you got for us?
Oh man, my head's spinning right now.
Well, try to at least hone in on one specific topic.
This quarterback thing is just such a kaleidoscope. It really is, and it could go so many different ways.
Yeah, they can. They got so many options, and you're right. It's just another option they can have, and everybody has their preference, and But when we're talking, everybody has to remember the first word they say when they start a sentence. I. When you say I think, that's cool, but it really doesn't matter. It's what Joe thinks.
Sure.
And that's all that's going to count.
Yes, sir.
There was a good stat you gave, Paul, about the first round. The only thing I would like to see that broken down, because you're taking the first round against the field. I would like to see how many of those quarterbacks in the 2nd round, what's the percentage, 3rd round, individually, and then compare them to the 1st round.
Right.
I would like to
I did not go that far. I simply the only non-first round quarterback chart I did involved the starters in the Super Bowl. And we found 12 of the 27 who have started the Super Bowl since 2000 came after the 1st round.
Right. And that's what I mean, 1st round against the field. And those are good stats, but I still would like to hear it broken down into how many of them were undrafted free agents, how many of them were 7th round or 6th round, all individually. And
I could tell you how many each were, but I can't tell you what the percentages were by how many were taken in each round. That I can't do. I didn't go that deep. I went deep, but not that deep.
Yeah, that's fine. But the thing with that is, I think we look at if the 2 guys, if 2 of the 3 falls to number 6, which I don't think will happen, I would have to make a decision there, and I think they would be the best quarterback, even if you're talking about guys in the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th round. The Daniels, or to me, Daniels or Williams. And if you're there to get one of those, those are different types of athletes compared to the ones you're going to be counting on to hope that they can catch on. Now, you have to be a certain team to when you are drafting somebody in the 4th and 5th round that's a quarterback. You have to have a certain foundation on your team for that to turn around that quick, for that guy to catch on. Like if you look at Dak, when Dak came out, I mean, Dak was okay in college. He was a pretty good college player, but he took that job from Romo because of the surrounding that was on that team that they had at that time. So a lot of times, the first rounders, they normally are going to a team that was a disaster the year before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
that has a rough environment. Sure.
Yeah, it's kind of tough. It's not a science. It's all luck. You got to be the right people coaching them, the right organization, and a player that can catch on. He has the mind to do these things, and he's an athlete that can translate to the NFL from college. All those things come into play, and it's so difficult with any draft pick.
Well, Coach, what do I always say? The league is the game is a spider web, right? I say it all the time. You can't look at anything in the National Football League like it's in a bubble. It is a spider web, which is why everybody who makes a definitive statement that I got to have this quarterback and I have to take him in the first round is playing with fool's gold.
Right.
You can't do that.
That's right. You can't force this into whatever you want it to be, this narrative you want it to be. You can't force that in. And if you're looking for a quarterback, that's dangerous when he's not there for you to take. So if he's not there for you to take, don't substitute him from somebody else. Well, you know what? Let's get him. He looks similar. Yeah, that's not going to work.
I mean, that's settling. That's what essentially you're laying out. You never want to do that. That's why if you want to get a quarterback, more of a reason why you have to get up to one or two, because it's hard to believe that teams have a love fest with three guys in the same draft class. I don't buy that. There's definitely a separation, meaning some teams love Caleb Williams, other teams love Jaden Daniels, somebody may love J.J. McCarthy, but the fact that all three of them are looked at equally by every team, I'm sorry, I don't buy that.
I don't buy it either.
They're not.
Yeah.
They're not. You can see it in now. You can listen. I listen to all these guys talking, and I hear guys flip flop in that. I heard not too long ago some people looked at Jalen more than they looked at Williams. They liked it Jaden Daniels more than Williams, and I heard that not too long ago.
Yeah, to each their own.
It does. Everybody has their own thoughts, their own feelings, and what they see, and that's what they're gonna base what they want to do on that. For me, I'm looking at it like if I can't get the ones I want, the guy I want, if I can't get him, I'm not moving.
Bingo.
And I think Paul was saying this before, not trading up at all. I think Paul said something like that.
I'm totally against trading up. I'm totally against it.
I was thinking about trading up, and now I'm on your side, Paul. I'm saying, for me, I'm going to stand still. I'm going to stand fast, and whatever player coming at that 6, I have a list of 7 guys, and if one of them are on the board when I get there, then, and most likely he is going to be there, that's the guy I'm going to take. And then I build from that. And if you want a quarterback, maybe the second round, I don't know what these guys are in the second round, but you're in position to build something. We do need a quarterback, and I tell all the listeners, go to that the Giants huddle y'all had posted yesterday with Charlie Weiss. Mm-hmm. He hit it exactly. I loved everything he had to say. Everything he had to say, I loved what he said. And I think that's what needs to be heard, and it's all going to come down to just one voice. There's so many voices going on right now. Sure. Only one voice is going to count.
Well, I mean, in the room, one guy may make the decision, but I can assure you multiple voices will at least weigh in. And appreciate the phone call, Coach Marvin. Thanks for giving us a ring. And that's why I always say the environment shapes the quarterback a lot more than the individual skill set. You got to look at what's around the QB, because if that changes, that's why people always call in and they say, well, if you took Brock Purdy, you moved him elsewhere. Yeah, it's probably going to change things, okay? Because that's the nature of the beast. Just like if you took Daniel Jones, you moved him elsewhere. If you took Aaron Rodgers, you moved him elsewhere. Things are going to change.
Wait a minute. You mean Purdy's actually better because he has McCaffrey and Samuel and Kittle and
Talent
Ayuk
helps, just a tad.
And an offensive line and a defense that can allow them to take chances?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's amazing, Lance.
Well, that's why
What a novel concept.
No, but there's a lot of people that have those conversations, which to me have no value or substance, because you're operating in a hypothetical world. The guy went where he went. He thrived. He took advantage of it, period. Who cares if he would have played in 25 other cities? RJ is in Georgia, joining us here on BBKO. What's happening, RJ?
Last caller, RJ. Go ahead.
Hey, what's going on, fellas?
Hi.
Listen. All right. Hey, man, listen.
I'm having issues today. You know what I'm saying? I want you guys to help me out.
All right, well, we'll try.
I have 2 jerseys here. Well, more than 2, but I have a Xavier McKinney jersey.
Yeah.
And I also have a Saquon Barkley jersey. And I know about the rumors, and I know both. They did not get franchise tag on them. So now I'm like, these jerseys. What am I going to do with these jerseys if I see Saquon in the Philly outfit, or if I see Xavier McKinney with the Oakland Raiders, just to name one team? You know, what am I going to do? I'm having issues, and I need you guys to help me out, please.
Well, they did at some point suit up for your favorite team, so it's not like you're going to lose those memories, RJ. It's just a matter of you may have to purchase a new item to meet the needs of the current roster. That's all.
You know, RJ, when I was a little kid, I had a number 10 Giants jersey, and that was after Fran Tarkenton. But after a few years, you know, when he got traded, number 10 became Brad Van Pelt, and I was okay with that.
That was my point. I love Brad Van Pelt, seriously. Now, another thing I want to ask you guys is, do you think that Joe Chain is actually telling these guys, look, go out there and see what you can get on the market, and if they offer you X amount, then we'll match that. You think that's the strategy behind this?
I don't know if he'd go so far to say we'll absolutely match it. He may say, listen, we have interest in keeping you. You know, if you'd like, bring back the offer so we could talk. But remember, that ball is in the court of the agent and the player. They're under no obligation to do that. That's more of a business courtesy that you're throwing out.
Now, Barkley, who has publicly said, and if you want to take him at face value, and I do, because I think I know him a little bit better than people outside the building, he has expressed a strong desire to be a part of this. He wants to be a legendary Giant and part of the legacy and tradition of this franchise. If you believe those words, then it's highly likely that he would call the Giants after whatever offer that he receives. It's highly likely. Whether or not, you know, McKinney does, I don't get the impression that he values the tradition card as much as Barkley does. And again, that doesn't mean he won't do it. But I would bank on Barkley being the guy who picks up that phone first and says, fellas, look, this is what I'm talking about. This is what they're offering me. I'd really like to stay. Is there something we can work out? I think that conversation is extremely likely.
Right. And, you know, and one other thing before I let you guys get back to the next caller is, with the Giants averaging, 14, 15 points a game last year?
Yeah, just over 15.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, it's imperative, man, that they either grab that kid from Washington.
Odunze, that's my guy.
Yes. Or, obviously, the other stud from LSU, Neighbors.
Yeah. And there'd be nothing wrong with that either.
Sure. Yeah,
you know, that way,
playmakers.
that way we'll have a playmaker, we'll have that X-receiver, and now our receiving core will look a little bit different now, you know, going into the upcoming season. That's all I have, fellas. Thank you for a few minutes.
Yep.
Have a good one.
The phone call. Remember, all of those weapons are dependent on how the offensive line plays and everything else that's involved in the equation. But you can't argue the last caller's point that they need to get that point total up. I mean, we've been talking about that throughout the offseason. You cannot rely on averaging 15 a game and thinking you're going to win many contests. All right, that is going to wrap up Thursday's edition of BBKL. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Today's episode of Big Blue Kickoff Live, part of the Giants platforms everywhere, and Giants.com/podcast. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest, and we'll speak to you on Friday right here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Have a good one.